everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 8, The Rule of 8, with a place further than the universe. And if you've been on my channel for any small series that's 12 to 14 episodes, you know that the Rule of 8 never steers us wrong. It has not. It is, I feel like Anchorman, where the one guy's like 60% of the time, it works every time. There's only been like one series that the Rule of 8 has let me down, but that is a special case. It was Attack on Titan. We're not going to discuss it because you can go watch the Rule of 8s over there. But with every other series that is a 12 to 14 episode, either season or series in itself, like this one, the 8th episode is usually very special. Probably because it's usually a transitional period where you're getting into the final act, so you're transitioning into it, or it can be a turning point where there's something revealed about characters, or it's just a really good episode. So my lucky number is 8, so I stick by the Rule of 8, and I'm really excited to get to it with our show today. So it's been a hot second since I've watched episode 7. I actually watched episode 7 before I went on vacation. You will probably notice this space looks different. Guts got a washing right now, since he'd been up for months and months and months on my window. And I got new shelving in the back. I'm working on kind of fixing up and sprucing up the recording space this summer. So episodes may look a little bit different in the background as we go. But yeah, so I watched episode 7 before I left. It was really, really good. I was very, very happy that we got a little bit more backstory, especially about the 3 older women that are part of the crew. We got to meet more of the crew as well. And now we are actually setting off towards Antarctica, which is really exciting. So do I think we're going to hit Antarctica like immediately? No, because the trip is quite long to get there. So I feel like this episode is all going to be about being on the boat. All I can think of is the Don Bluth film Pebble and the Penguin, where it's like the good ship Misery. I can only think of that. So we'll see. Hopefully it's not going to be that terrifying. I get easily seasick, so I would be terrible on this ship, probably, unless you gave me a buttload of Dramamine. So we do have a few comments before we start here. I want to apologize and say I had just gotten back from vacation, and the moderator was like, okay, you're good to look at these comments. And like 90% of them were about how I thought in episode 6 we were in Australia, but we were actually in Singapore. I will defend myself in that I've never been to Singapore. Geography is my worst subject, and I don't know landmarks for Asian countries because I'm American and they don't teach us those things. So any world history I did was 20 years ago or more. So there you have it. And maybe I should read more into Asian countries and landmarks, but I just don't know. I find out through anime. That's one of the things that draws me to anime, is learning about cultures I don't know about. I thought it was Australia because they had mentioned all of the English on the signs. I was like, oh, Australia. And plus the other thing was they never mentioned before we were going to Singapore. It was never on the to-do list. They were like, oh, we're going to go to Singapore before we go to Fremantle. Never brought up. So I just assumed, as one would, that it was like, oh, we'll go to Sydney and then we'll go to Fremantle. But that was not the case. I do want to thank Alex Cornejo, because their comment was basically talking about how the show did not come right out and say they were in Singapore. They tried to just sneak it in like little markers. And I guess if you're from Japan, you know that, I guess, or you'd look it up, but I did not look it up. But anyway, I appreciate everyone trying to tell me to various degrees. Farius was the one that noted, I guess I'll be the one to say it, but they didn't make it to Australia. The episode took place in Singapore. But yeah, as long as we're nice to content creators and let them know respectfully that things were, I'll be honest, some of the comments were a little rude in how they told me that I was wrong, and some were very congenial. So those of you that were congenial, thank you. If I got a little bit irritated, it's because I answered several comments in a row being like, yes, I know. 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 There's only so many comments before you're like, I get it. Yes. But anyway, for the record, episode 6 took place in Singapore. Someone else did comment later and they were like, I didn't know either. And I was like, I'm glad I'm not the only one. I feel like nobody wants to fess up when they get it wrong too, because nobody likes being wrong, especially me. And then on the internet, people are always like, how'd you not know? And then somebody's like, I got it wrong too. And I'm like, that's the real one. That one right there. They're real. also, Kumi Ray, your comment was really awesome. So I didn't have anything to add from Kumi Ray's comment, but their comment was really cool for episode 6. So thank you for going above and beyond on that. But yeah, so I'm excited to see what's going to happen this episode. I have no clue what we're going to get, but we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right into episode 8 of A Place Further Than the Universe. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, this episode was really good. This episode went by very quickly. I was getting caught up in the episode itself, and so I was just staring at the screen, just taking it all in, and then I was suddenly like, wait, are we about done? It went by very quickly, although time flies when you're puking your guts up. So I could relate a lot in this episode, but having it just be summer as I'm recording this, the idea of sunbathing, I have a very weird disposition when it comes to hot versus, some people say they're cold natured people. Some people say they're hot natured people. I get warm very quickly and I sweat a lot, but I feel like maybe I'm cold natured because I can, once I'm cold, I get chilled and I hate that feeling. So I often would be there's a patch on the second floor of one of the buildings where I work at, and there's light that filters in. I feel like a lizard on a hot rock because I'll just sit there and warm up some days. I feel like that with them outside soaking in all of the sunshine. I feel like I would be that person too. So I can definitely relate. But yeah, I would be doing the same thing as they would, because once you get to a certain point, you're not going to have any warm surfaces anymore. It's going to be pretty cold for months and months and months. So I would definitely be soaking up all that sunshine that I could be as well. And they're like, we should do this in Antarctica as well. Which, granted, they could, because, there's lots of sunshine in Antarctica. They'll just have maybe different attire on, right? And the pose they do is very similar to the one that they do in the OP. So I'm sure they'll get a chance to. But yeah, they're like, it's done, right? And they're like, no, we did it. No, I like that difference between it's done, because it's not done yet. They still got the journey, but they did do the thing. They did get the ship ready to go. It is kind of sad when they leave. There's not a lot of people watching them go. It's not like the last voyage where there was lots of media attention and there were giant crowds wishing them off, because that does affect, that affects your morale leaving off. It looks like most of the people watching them go this time around are all family, which is fine. It's good that they have family and friends seeing them off, but I'm sure it feels different than the last time they left, when it was a much different fanfare. I do love the streamers and everything, but girl, Kamari, Hinata, don't fall off the ledge. I don't blame Shirase for putting you in a chokehold because you nearly came off of the ledge. One thing I really like about the narration in this opening scene is Kamari saying, I don't know what this trip will mean in the end. She's saying it in the present tense. The English teacher in me was really happy with that, because oftentimes what a lot of narration does is it says it in the past tense, being like, we didn't know what this trip would mean for us. We had no clue what was in store. But saying I don't know means that she's saying this in the present. So I kind of like that from a narrative standpoint, because it makes us, the audience, kind of still not in the know with what's going to happen next, and it makes things feel more in the moment than this is a reflective looking back sort of situation, which could kind of come into play later on if something, scary happens. Then we, the audience, don't know if it's going to end up okay. We don't know if all these characters are going to get out unscathed. There's a very good chance they won't, and that's kind of scary. So, and it's something that won't come out of nowhere, because they've prefaced it throughout most of this series. This is a dangerous mission. Shirase lost her mom to this mission, so shit can go down, and you may not leave Antarctica. And judging by this episode, they got a lot of work to do, because they've all established that they're not in the best stamina like some of the other people on the boat, so that basically this episode did a really good job. Rule of 8 doesn't let us down. Did a good job of kind of prefacing, this isn't going to be a walk in the park, and this boat trip is the least of our concerns. And they're already at this stage. So it could get real very quickly. And that's cool to preface to your audience, because it kind of makes us a little bit wary going forward, right? I also really like this monologue because Kamari's like, we're taking time off of school, we're missing tests, we're, possibly affecting our entrance exams, which in Japan is a really big deal if you're trying to get into certain schools. But I really do love the message of this show when it gets to this part here, because all of them are like waving goodbye and waving goodbye from the shore. But as of now, we are no longer high school students who can never take a step forward. Like that whole opening monologue from Kamari made me really emotional. I was like, have I ever considered crying within the first 5 minutes of an episode? Usually you save that for the end of the episode when they hit you with the emotional waves. But here it was like, no, we're going to hit you right off the bat with it. And I was like, I'm not going to cry within the first 5 minutes of the show. But if you did, I wouldn't blame you. But yeah, I love that. I love that notion of, regardless of what happens on this trip, if anything, it proves that these girls are not going to be afraid of taking a step forward in the future, that they're not going to be high school students who never branched out. They're not going to be 17 or 16-year-olds who tried but didn't accomplish anything. Like, I love that. And I love Shirase looking out at sea as they take off and it says that. Because yeah, even if nothing ever eventful happens to them from here on in, if they get back and Hinata stays at the convenience store, if Shirase just goes to college and gets like a desk job somewhere, if, Kamari goes and gets a business degree and works behind a cubicle the rest of her life, which I don't think that will happen for these women, because I think this has proven that they can do anything, and it will give them the courage and confidence to go out and try whatever they want. But if it doesn't work out, because you never know how life's going to be, you just don't know. If it never works out, they can say, we did this. We went out and did this and accomplished this. And who else can say that they've done that? And that's such a great thing. And it gives a lot of hope and courage to be like, just go do the damn thing. Because, otherwise, you're not doing it. So why not? Obviously, you have to, be within your means. They're getting lucky that they didn't have to pay really to go on this trip, other than, their time and working with the one girl's the influencer, Yuzuki is. So working with that. But, they're very fortunate and privileged to be able to go on this trip. But it's like, if you have that privilege and opportunity sitting there, take it, because you may not get it ever again. And they can now say that they've done that and they don't have to worry about it anymore. So I really like also little tiny animation details I want to point out. I love when we get the side profiles of all four of the girls. Their noses all look a little bit different. I know that seems like such a silly little thing, but whenever anime makes like the tiny little subtle details, like even Yuzuki and Shirase, whose noses both have a point, they point out in different ways. Hinata's nose is a little bit rounder. Kamari's comes out a little different way. They all look different. And I appreciate the attention to detail, to making them all look different. I appreciate that. And it looks even better when you see them side by side. And then they take the picture of them and they're the number 2, because this is the second trip to Antarctica. So yeah. So this one thing that I was asking about in the reaction that I'm very curious about, it says the high school girls are conducting interviews. Explain what your job is. One person is enough. I kind of wondered why the people didn't just come to them to give the interviews. Like if they just had like a list of people to give an interview to and they just one by one like had them come in and tell what they do. But then when I thought about it, when they go and visit the one woman who fell asleep at the bar last episode, she's explaining the equipment that they use to collect the bacteria and water samples. And I suppose the whole point is that you go to each of them at their stations on the boat, and then that gets to tell them like what they do and what equipment they use and what their point is there. And it adds a little bit of a wow factor to the interview. So I get that now. That makes sense. But I still don't understand why Shirase is the one doing the interview, because she's the one, I guess, because her mom's the one that got lost on the boat. I don't know why Yuzuki isn't doing it, but it's fine. I think it's good for Shirase to give the interview. But yeah, the boat rocking. I'm glad the laptop's strapped down, especially after this episode. So one cool thing about this trip is it's teaching them to adult. I've talked about it in previous episodes, but one thing we talk about on the speech team when we go to our national tournament, because it's a week long, it's kind of like a boat ride, I guess. You're stuck in this hotel for a week, so it's like being stuck on a boat for a week. But we tell the students, the coaches, we have to judge rounds ourselves, so we're always gone to other rooms. And the way that they do it at those tournaments is they will basically have you judge different rounds, and you don't judge rounds with your own students in it. So we're judging other people's students. But the coaches were gone all day, and we tell the students, we're like, up until now, we've always been there, like, to help you get lunch, to help you get cleaned up, to meet you outside the van at the end of the day. But when you're at a hotel for a week, we're like, you kind of are on your own. And one coach, he'd always be like, you need to be an adult in the world. So think like an adult. Like, what would you do in this situation, and keep yourself organized and on time? And one thing we always teach students for competition is, if you're on time, you're late. So be early. And I think Yuzuki talks about that with how they need to be efficient with their time doing the interviews, because they're not just there to have fun. They have jobs to do. They have training apparently to do, and they have to manage how many hours in a day they have on a boat, which honestly, you would think on a boat that time would go still and you'd have all the time in the world, but you really don't. Not in the long run. No, time will go quickly if you have lots of things to do. I also like the little details of later on they strap the boxes to those little anchors. They show the anchors early on in the episode, but they don't explain what they do, and then they strap them down later, which is fun. Man, doing your makeup on a boat that's rocking back and forth is a process. Kudos to her. I would have moisturizer and sunscreen on, and that'd be about it. But yeah, she's like, you need to wake me up even harder. And then the girls came, and she's like, I need 30 more minutes, maybe 15 more minutes to get ready, which is funny. I like that. And I like that they're like, really? They said, did she not have eyebrows? And then apparently some women, I guess, shave them off and draw them back on, or draw them on. I don't know. Some people shave off their eyebrows and draw them on, but I usually think of drag queens doing that. But I know some people do it in real life. And then I don't have very big eyebrows. My eyebrows are very light. So I could pencil them in if I wanted to, but I kind of have hooded eyes. So I think it would make me look very dramatic if I've done it when I've cosplayed on this channel. I've sometimes, if I didn't have these glasses on, when I've done cosplay, I have darkened with eyeshadow the eyebrows a little bit, but I don't know. Some people pencil in their eyebrows and it's like, it looks very fake, and I'm not about that life. So, but yeah, apparently some people, I guess, typically would, draw them in. Interesting. I guess I didn't know she didn't have eyebrows on when we first were doing it, but now it makes sense. So they talk about stopping at the stations to collect water samples and use the monitor to kind of measure the bacteria and everything, which is cool. I like the fact that one thing about this episode that was really neat is you kind of see the ship as an organism, and you see the ship as all of these moving parts and pieces, and they all have a purpose. They all do a job. They all connect with one another. So one thing that's really cool is when they showed like the people casting the ship off and the people manning the station where the waves were and everything, all of that showed my throat is dry, showed how it was very realistic. And this is what you would actually do if you were on the ship. You would see people doing all of these things, which is really cool. I like that a lot. Had to go get a drink. But anyway, I like the realism that we see on this ship, and just how much this series, it's cutesy and it's fun, but it doesn't lose kind of the realistic factor of it, which I feel like if you're not someone that's, I feel like anime is a spectrum, and people don't really know that unless you really get into anime. People just think it's like fan service and like upskirt shots and stuff like this. And I'm like, no, not really. But I feel like the more realistic anime like this one, or like Monster, for example, can garner some really good audiences, and should garner a lot of audiences, especially if they're not used to anime, because it just feels more real and people get more invested in it because of that. But I love these two women, the woman with the bowl cut and then the girl that was drunk at the bar. I like both of them, and they're good sports. I'm like, on the one hand, Shrase holding the microphone up to her mouth was like, rookie mistake. But also I'm like, ma'am, you're a scientist. Just move away from the mic. But, then we wouldn't have the gag. So we have to do it like that anyway. But yeah, I like Yuzuki's like, come on now. So In any case, they're interviewing all of these people about all the stuff they do on the boat, everything, and then they end up being late to the kitchen staff so they can go peel potatoes. Now, I understand that this ship was underfunded and they're kind of working on a skeleton crew and skeleton budget, but knowing how much this ship rocks, I would have invested in a couple potato peelers. Because using a knife to peel them potatoes, that seems dangerous on the ship, but I guess it ended up working. I really like this woman that's on the ship. I like her that's in the kitchen. I like how upbeat she is, how excited she is to have them there. She doesn't like tease them or put them down because they're terrible at peeling potatoes, although she does throw some subtle shade with being like, you guys clearly don't help around the house a lot. And we're like, ma'am, maybe they don't have potatoes. Maybe they do other things around the house. But I like that she just shades him that one time. And then she is like, look, I work in a kitchen. I'm a lunch lady. I work at a school is what it sounds like. And she's like, I'm used to doing this sort of thing. But she seems super upbeat, if not a little bit shady. She's like, we don't want you getting hurt. She's like, I'm a pro. I'm usually a lunch lady, but I'm constantly thinking up and preparing dishes for picky eaters like you all. Which is fun. So she's used to working in a school, so I'd imagine her temperament, she can handle some rough crowds with what she's had to do. I did substitute teaching in a lunchroom once, and it was probably my least favorite subbing experience ever. Because it was all like, it was at a grade school. We had to hurry up and get these little kids to eat their lunch. And then we had to hurry up and shuffle them out to go to recess. And they just made a mess and it was loud. And I was just like, this is what hell sounds like. It's essentially what I thought that day. I was like, oh, I'm glad I'm not a PE teacher or a cafeteria worker. My dad worked in a cafeteria at a school for a while. He was a custodian and did cafeteria work as well. But yeah, he's like, so you need to work hard so you can get up on deck soon. And then they talk about from 1,100 hours to 1,700 hours, training is permitted on deck, and it's counterclockwise. So, okay, so 1,200 hours would be noon. So from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., you can essentially go and work out upstairs, which is pretty cool. I noticed, I think the hours changed throughout the day, I think depending on what they were doing. When they said training on the deck, I assumed it was like more in-depth, hands-on of like with the equipment and stuff and what to expect, or doing like simulations of things you would do up top. But I get you're on a rocking ship, your options are a little limited. So it's mainly just exercise and work out, get some vitamin D and sunshine whilst you still can before you go up and, before you have to go and go back into the ship where it's rocking and you're kind of isolated. I like that. She's like, we're allowed to train topside, and I'll take you up there when you're done. So yeah, the ocean is beautiful. And Yuzuki, girl, for her being up against the side of the boat at the start and then her on the guardrail at the end, I'm not gonna lie, I know it was symbolic, that scene where they were seeing the ocean spray, but the whole time I was kind of frozen in that moment because I was like, this is a realistic show, up to a point. What if you get drug out to sea? Like I was like so tense in that moment, even though it was awe-inspiring and wonderful and inspirational. I was like, what if they get knocked overboard? And that's the end of the show. Rule of 8, done. I just was like, oh, I would have been Yuzuki, right? So like, okay, so they end up running. Now the one of the guys who I'm assuming was, he was the one that was stripping in the one photo of all them out in the snow, that the CEO had. He blushes as he runs by her. I'm like, oh, dude, you're not subtle. Does she know it, though? Because he like blushes as he runs by. Does she notice? Yeah, oh, she knows. That look on her face, she knows. And then the one guy starts with a T. He was at the bar. He follows behind him. Yeah. She knows. She sees it. She's like, if they announce clockwise, you go this way. If you announce counterclockwise, you go that way. And yeah, you'd want to pay attention because you don't want people to run into you as you're trying to exercise. But yeah, so I feel like what Kamari gets like baffled by in this moment is just the fact that the ship is so huge. It's a lot bigger than it seems. And you could easily get tired out if you don't pace yourself. But the cook brings up a good point that you need stamina. You're going to be working in some really sub-zero conditions that are going to be harsh. You've got to build up your strength, which I got a little worried in this episode, especially with them getting sick, because as someone who's been nauseated and sick many times before, when you get seasick, you really don't feel like anything else afterwards. So the fact that they probably wasted like a day or two being sick that's roughsville. I really like Shirase's pigtails. They're super cute and makes sense because her hair is so long. So you need strong bodies. Shirase seems super into all of this because she remembers that her mom was exercising. She feels the importance. She understands the need of it. Yuzuki is the one that seems the most hesitant because she has the opposite of constitution, right? And the idea is you'll be an active drag on the people around you if you don't have stamina. That does make me a little bit nervous because, you know, Shirase makes a point of saying her mom worked out all the time. Her mom's one of the ones that was left behind and died. So what does that say for our 4 girls who are struggling to not get motion sick in this one episode out at sea? I don't know. But they're like, yeah, we'll just do our best. She'll catch on soon enough. And yeah, everybody else ran out and they're like, yep, are you okay? And she's like, why is it so big? And they're like, you know how big it is. We've walked around it countless times. I like Shirase and Kamari having the matching uniforms. It's super cute. And Shirase, like, getting Kamari to get excited and come along with her. And then them doing, like, the arm weights. Like, I feel that. I feel that. Like, you can't strain yourself. You don't want to get too crazy, right? I love Kamari saying they'll be Amazons when they get to the Antarctic. That's really great. And then Hinata taking advantage of the fact that Yuzu can't lift her arms to like fight back against her, writing "I'll kill you" on her forehead. Hilarious. I also like the pin, the penguin pin. That's super cute. I want to give this show a shout out because I'm watching Gunbuster the same time I'm watching this show. And in that episode that aired yesterday over on the channel, if you've not got a chance to check it out, there is a bath scene. There are bath scenes. Scenes with these women straight out of the bath. And, yeah, there's a lot of nudity in those scenes, which granted, this is not, you know, an 18+ show like Gunbuster is, but I do feel like they handle the scenes very tastefully with the bath scene, although Hinata whipping out like the Nerf water gun is really funny, but I was glad they did it very tastefully. You know, 1980s versus now anime has changed a lot, which there's a lot of differences between those two, but they are kind of similar in ways, so I'm glad this one did what it did with the tasteful bath scene. I do think it's interesting they talk about the salt water, and you can see in the animation there's like little bits of salt in the water in their hair. I thought that was a cool effect. Salt water dries out everything. And so I don't know. On the one hand, the salt water would probably be exfoliating for your skin. On the other hand, it would make your hair really crunchy and dry if you didn't get it all rinsed out well. And I have naturally very thin hair. I kind of feel like me and Kamari, we feel a kindred spirit between us. So I would kind of feel like her and be really sticky if I didn't get it all rinsed out, right? But yeah, I like that they have the bath and they have this little like shower head to rinse it out as well. It's more permeating. Yep. And so a lot of people cut their hair off because it gets really crusty and everything. And I like that Kamari and Hinata are like, let's cut our hair. Kamari's hair is already short and she cuts it herself. So she's like, I don't care. Let's do it. And Hinata is such a risk taker and doing the adrenaline rush. She's like, I'm here for it. Let's go. But Yuzuki is like, never. My hair is part of my influencer image. And Shirase is like, no, my hair is part of my looks. I will not do it. And they're like, come on. And then when Kamari says, I cut my own bangs all the time, and they all three like silently look at each other like, at long last the mystery is answered why her hair looks like that. I love that none of them said it out loud. They're like, we don't want to tell Kamari that we think she has a bad hairdo, but now it all makes sense. She's like, what are you guys talking about? So they go up to eat the meal. They talk about the missed meal cards go here, and if you've already eaten, it's black. So that's interesting. Now, Honami and Yumiko, I don't know if we're supposed to know who they are. They missed their meals. But yeah, there's a line of them getting like the curry, and the curry has the beef and carrots and the potatoes that they peeled and onions in it. It looks very hearty, which it looks like a meal you would want to eat after you've worked out and gotten ready. But then they talk about what they have left to do, and it's laundry, which I kind of love how domestic this episode is, in the sense that it shows these girls like they have to keep track of everything and basically be adults on the ship along with everyone else. So they had their dinner, they had their bath, and they're like, oh crap, we have to do laundry, because I'm sure their moms, for the most part, do their laundry at home. So, or when they do their laundry, they're not on like a time crunch. So it's cool for them having to like figure all that out and designate like when they're supposed to do it. And then Shirase's forgetfulness is noteworthy, because if we recall back in episode 6, she forgot about the passport. So her forgetting that she got laundry duty is really funny. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll just go sit down and eat my meal. I mean, why not? So they managed to get there to do the laundry room and the bath in time. There's a little sign on there that says, regarding use of fresh water, freshwater baths permitted during ship-wide training. Saltwater baths are allowed too. Please try to conserve water. Okay. So I would imagine the salt water is a lot easier to get a hold of because you're on the ocean, but you only have so much fresh water. So they're like, let's try to conserve and not use up all we've got before we even get to Antarctica, right? Okay. But yeah. And then poor Yuzuki. Yuzuki is just out. Girl is like, she's spent. She's like, I've done my due diligence and now I'm done. But yeah, and then it all starts again tomorrow. Do you think we're going to hold out? Well, and then everybody gets seasick. Now, I'm going to be real with you all. I have been on a ship. I've been on a cruise once, and I'm very prone to getting seasick. I had to use like the little Dramamine patches to keep myself from getting seasick for the entire journey. I don't know if I could go to Antarctica after watching this episode. I was like, ooh, I don't know if I could do that. Because the seasickness, you're right. You do have to keep, the patches will last you like 4 days maybe, and then you have to replace them. But yeah, I went fishing on the ocean once with a family trip, and I just basically sat beside the captain the entire time and was nauseous the entire way, even after taking medicine. And so I don't know if I could handle it. I guess, like the cook says, your body will get used to it, but then afterwards, when you get back on land, your body has to get used to that again. So it's just, you gotta get your sea legs, right? Which is funny. She does bring up a good point, though. The one woman comes in, she's like, you know, even if you don't have an appetite, you need to eat something to keep your stamina up. Because, yeah, if you're someone that gets nauseous when you get sick, your body, like, purges itself, but then it can get dehydrated, or it can be so weak because you don't have any energy that you just kind of end up in this perpetual cycle of just being lethargic. And that's okay if you're at home and you have time to slowly work yourself back up, but they're on a ship going to Antarctica. They need to not only work themselves back up to normal, but they have to be building strength and stamina for when they get there. So this episode made me a little bit worried about that, but at the same time, we don't get to see everything that goes on this trip. It feels like they skipped ahead to once they got better and they saw like the end of they saw the waves out crashing outside of the ship. They just cut to them getting to Antarctica, and we didn't really get to see any more of the training or a montage of what was happening after that, which is fine. I like that they didn't do the stereotypical thing of the da-da-da, do the montage of them getting better. I like that they skipped all that. That sounds great. But, and they may still have a ways to go. The one woman on the deck of the ship, she said, you know, we've seen the icebergs now. We know we're close to Antarctica, but it's still going to be a while before we make landfall. So that could just be the start of them getting there, and we may still have a little bit more to go, right? But yeah, dang. But everybody else in the ship is all getting used to everything, or they are used to everything, so they can just eat and be fine. And I like Shirase's tenacity, where she's like, I've got to try, and then even when it fails, they all just keep going. It's great. So then the one woman talks about, right before she talks about the 40, 50, 60, the howling, maddening, and screaming, the woman that works in the kitchen, she puts like this little poster up that says the Great Jump Rope Competition. The winning team gets a steak dinner, which jump roping is a form of exercise. So again, encouraging people to keep fit. Sizzle, 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 pictured as the steaks from 3 years ago. This time it's meat, meat, meat. Meat is the great motivator. Ah, if you're planning on winning, please bring your provided Army NICE nice knife, please. The steaks are not pre-cut. You were given an Army knife for cutting steak. Okay. Which, the Army knife is interesting because it shows, like, the fact that they used the picture from 3 years ago means, like, here's what the steaks were like, and they were pre-cut, which we've had to save money, so they are steaks, but you're gonna have to cut them yourself. At least they are steaks, because when it said meat, meat, meat is the motivator, I was like, is it gonna be steaks or is it gonna be something different? Because the times are tight and the budget's a little different. But in any case, it says from 800 hours to 1400 hours, everybody's going clockwise. So from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, they're exercising. So the times have changed a little bit. And then I guess it's because they were getting close to the waves and everything coming in. I like when they go outside the next time, they're doing the same thing where they're passed out on the boat deck, but it's not happy in the sunshine. Everything's like muted, and it's like the sun has like whitewashed everything and it's all bleached out. And then the one woman's like, yeah, there's going to be some waves, so we might want to get back into the ship. I wish they could have seen the whales more, because that part was kind of sad where she only got to see the whales for like 2 seconds. Speaking of Gunbuster, there's a character called Tamaki in an episode that I just watched. I'm pretty sure their name was Tamaki. Their haircut kind of looks like Kamari. That show came out in 1988, so I wonder if Kamari is influenced by that character. I don't know. But yeah, poor girl. She tries to see the whales, and then she just ends up making herself seasick. So yeah, the girl with the drawn-on eyebrows. She's like, are you guys ready? And they talk about 53 degrees, the record set a long time ago. The last time I came here, it felt like we rocked so far. The desk was up there. When you go to Antarctica, you may surpass these things. She talks about the howling 40 degrees, the maddening 50 degrees, and the screaming 60 degrees. So essentially, the way that the ship rocks the waves, like the degree of the waves, which a 15-degree wave was terrifying. So I can't imagine 40, 50, 60. But yeah, at that point, that would get me. I'd be like, I do love our science lesson today that we learn about the waves. And because there's no land mass in the ocean where they're going to, there's nothing to block the currents. I've always heard the Atlantic Ocean was much rougher than the Pacific Ocean because the Pacific Ocean had land masses pushing it closer together, so it wasn't as big of a sea as the Atlantic, and the Atlantic was rougher because of that. That's what I always heard, so it seems like it's a little bit justified by this episode. But yeah, the fact that they're just going to go straight through the current is absolutely wild. She's like, your insides are going to be like a roller coaster. Well, if they weren't already, they are by the end of this episode. I do love when they're up on the deck and it shows the waves coming in. Her with the captain, where she's like, it feels like I'm fighting. It felt very much like Jaws. I kept thinking like, Jaws, Moby Dick, Call Me Ishmael. Like it was such a rush. I love the intensity of that scene because it just feels like what it would probably feel like up on the deck of that ship, right? I also like this dichotomy of we have this scenes with the girls and it's a lot more cutesy and fun, but then you cut to the scenes with just the adults and it's a lot darker and takes on a much more serious tone, which when you travel with, groups of students and teachers or adults and adolescents, there is that tone shift. So I appreciate the realism of the scene in that case. But yeah, poor Yuzuki, she's given up. And Shirase's like, we can't yet because we still have so much to go. Kamari, when she said the blood was rushing to her head, I was like, ooh, I was afraid when she hit that box, I was afraid it was going to really hurt her. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want you to really get hurt, but they end up just sitting there and talking. I liked that the whole time Shirase was pushed up against the metal cabinet so she couldn't go around any further. And then Yuzuki's like, what if we don't adapt like the people on the boat? We seem like completely different organisms. What if we don't get used to it? And Shirase says, we don't have a choice. We have to do it. And I like Kamari making that distinction of, true, we do need to adapt and work our hardest because we have to. We're here. We made it. But I like her adding in, we did have a choice. We do have a choice. This was our choice that we made. So that's why we're working so hard, because we did decide to do this. And I like her monologue to Shirase. It almost seemed like a very half full versus half empty glass, which I liked that they do. And then Hinata's like, well said. She's like, that's optimism. I wanted it. And then she's like, look, I'm going to go to the toilet because I need to throw up, but good speech. These poor girls. And yeah, I like the little spiel with all of them when they when they fall in the hallway and then they get back up and they all kind of look at each other and then they look at the doorway and they all look outside. And Yuzuki's like, what are we doing? But then she smiles and she's like, I want to go outside for a bit. I'm like, why would you open up that door and look outside and see how crazy it is? I'm surprised that none of the people on the boat didn't yell at you, because that seems like a very controversial yet dumb thing to do. I'm like, what if they fell overboard? No. But instead they just get splashed by the wave. And I get when they say it's pitch black, that's why they wondered if it was raining or if it was the ocean waves, because they couldn't see anything. I like that line by Shirase, a continent protected by storms and raging waves. I would not have been out there. There is no way. No way, no how. But I guess it works. I guess they got used to it, and then the next day they were like, all right, we're done. We're over it. I do like with Hinata and Yuzuki, the kind of little bump in their hair. Like their hair, if it got crusty from the salt, it shows that it's a little bit bumpy. I don't think that it was like that before. I like that little touch. It's cool. But yeah. And then they're all back into the kitchen. And what does it say? It says, once we make landfall, you're going to get land sick again. And it says, left 10 degrees, 5 miles. And they all go back up there and look. I love the description that there's no clouds, no birds. It's just a sea of blue and it kind of looks like space. I love that. Like, it just seems like it's void and empty like space is. I think that's really cool, the description of that. And then they see the icebergs. That's really neat. An infinite world reminiscent of outer space. And then they start to see the little faint edges of the place further than the universe. I love it. It's great. And they're like, we're back, aren't we? It'll be a long time before we're even opening the front door, but they're close. And then the last scene at the very end credits is the globe with all the white roses, which is, done for funeral flowers, and the CEO's holding it. So, okay. I don't know if she's going to take that to Antarctica or what she's planning on doing with it, but this episode was really good. As someone that gets seasick quite easily, I could empathize a lot with our girls. And it really does set the stakes of everyone on the trip treats it so seriously, because it is. And I think that's one nice thing, is that even though these girls are having an adventure, all the adults around them are like, yeah, that's cool and all, but this is a serious trip and here's what we're doing about it. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that they kind of take it upon themselves to sort of be more mature along with the others on the ship as well, right? Because they're getting the lucky privilege of being able to be on this expedition. So this is really cool. I like this episode a lot. Rule of 8 has not let us down. Hasn't let us down yet. So the crazy thing is we still have episode 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. We still have 5 episodes left, which sometimes when there's 13 or 14 episodes in a series, they'll say it's the rule of 9. So that just makes me excited for next week's episode, because if this wasn't, I feel like maybe next week could be the rule of 8 for this series, because they're probably going to make it to Antarctica either next episode, if we're not already there, or we're at least going to get to the land portion by the end of next episode before we make landfall. So that has me excited for next week. And I'm going to be really curious to see what we get. But I'm kind of glad we're past the seasick part. It needed to happen. It needed to be shown, but I'm glad we're past it. So anyway, I'm excited to hear your comments down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of A Place Further Than the Universe. Bye.